so let's just kind of go with the what ifs. Certainly, I anticipate Ohio State beating Penn State with relative ease based on where they're at right now, right? With Clifford being injured and struggling a little bit on the offensive line, I think that's a kind of it's not a recipe for success for them Saturday. And so let's just assume Michigan beats Michigan State in in East Lansing. I would see a scenario where you're going to see some combination of Georgia, Cincinnati, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan ahead of Oklahoma, which I think would enrage a lot of Oklahoma fans. But at the same time, I think that's probably where you would see them. Specifically, when you look at Michigan, would have at that point would have a much better resume than Oklahoma. When you look at obviously Georgia and Alabama, and even Cincinnati to a certain degree, that win obviously their schedule isn't great, but that win at Notre Dame probably trumps anything that Oklahoma has on their schedule. So yeah, I think you'll see. Yeah, I mean the brand speaks for itself. I think from that perspective, but I think what you'll probably see is there's not a lot of value for Oklahoma right now. However, they will, and that's why I said at the open, like Oklahoma fans shouldn't worry, even if they're six. I wouldn't even be remotely concerned with that just because of the fact that Oklahoma has these three marquee games here in November. All three teams are likely going to be ranked. So you beat these three teams, two of them on the road, and then you go and beat one of these three likely again in the Big 12 championship game, and it'll take care of itself.
Yes, it will. Style points are always going to be important to a certain degree, but style points are almost everything for Cincinnati right now, while the other teams they just need to win. Just win the games. To Jason's point, Oklahoma wins all their games by 1 point. They're going to be in the playoff. Yeah, in the major conferences, the most of the schedules are backloaded to a certain extent. Certainly, these Big Ten schedules are amongst these contenders are so backloaded that they now have to go through a gauntlet. Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Oklahoma has the tougher teams outside of Texas to deal with now as well. That's going to just completely exceed anything Cincinnati's got to face. Where Cincinnati's got to go out there and really impress, no question.
Well, and that's why there was a lot of just discussion about Cincinnati struggled, not completely for the entire game, but only beat Navy by what 6 or 7, what it was 27-20 I think, or 27-21. But I think them struggling is much more detrimental to their success than Oklahoma struggling. That was honestly a game that they really could ill afford to play the way that they played on Saturday, because to your point, we talked about this last week, Mark, that Cincinnati, they only have really one more meaningful game. I mean, and it's SMU right now, where SMU, what are they ranked? Are they
19, I believe?
Yeah, so they have an opportunity there with a top 25 team, but other than that, they don't sniff anyone even close to the top 25 the rest of the year. So yeah, no, I think it's like I said, I think it'll take care of itself. It may be a little bit ugly next week, seeing where Oklahoma could be ranked. I mean, and then the Michigan State factor, if they beat Michigan, maybe Oklahoma's up another notch, but still, I would be surprised if it's any higher than 5 or maybe even 6. Because I think the way that they look at it, Mark, and it's kind of interesting, the committee, and sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but just the way that they look at the committee, I think they value the way that the teams play on the field, at least initially. I mean, I think the record and obviously the conference champion versus not a conference champion plays into the decision making later on in the year, but I think more so, at least early on, they value who do I think is the best team, not necessarily record or not necessarily who they played or who they beat. Who do I think is the best team? Could this team beat that team? So I think looking at it, it would be hard for you to say that Oklahoma is a better team than um, than Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Cincinnati. Heck, you could even say like you could even throw Pitt in there as well, or Wake Forest. Like, if you're an Oklahoma fan, are you very confident that they could beat either one of those teams right now? I mean, heck, Wake put 70 on Army, so I know that their defense isn't playing great right now, but the way Oklahoma's defense is struggling, they wouldn't want to face either one of those teams right now.
Yeah, based on name value, as soon as you hit me with forget Wake Forest, even they're not playing as well as Pitt. They've got a better record, but talk about a backloaded schedule. Their last 4 games, if they can make it through those 4 games, and they're not great teams, but for that league, they are. They're playing the best teams in the league at the end of the year. But you hit me with Oklahoma and Pitt. Well, my initial reaction is, of course, Oklahoma is going to beat Pitt, but I don't know. They're struggling against Nebraska and West Virginia and on down the line, Kansas. Maybe they don't beat Pitt.
Yeah, I mean, and they threw it. I mean, I still have, like I said earlier, I still have a lot of respect for Clemson's defense. They've not
Yeah.
played um, well at all on the offensive side of the ball, but defensively, in Pitt, for kind of the middle part of that game, second, third, and even a little bit in the fourth quarter, they kind of dominated Clemson offensively. So, um, yeah, I know it'll be kind of weird to think through that, but or to think that maybe Pitt could be a better team based on how the season started and where you think that they would be. But yeah, the name factor, it's there. It's always going to be there. I mean, I think for some of those teams, whether that's whether it how you decide to rank these teams, if it's a computer or a human factor or whatever. But yeah, um, it's interesting to think about. I think November is going to be really, really exciting, just all across the country.
And this week in the Big Ten, we're going to get our first glimpse of with the 2 titanic matchups of Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, whether that's going to be some kind of a bloodbath between those 4, if they're just going to really hammer it out, or I've got a bit of a possibility in me that based on what we've seen that a couple of those teams have played the lesser teams in that division, Michigan State, Indiana, Michigan, Rutgers, and they weren't pretty wins. They were workmanlike kind of one-score wins, where Ohio State, they've got 3 of those in the division against the 3 lesser teams, and they were just 50-point first halves, like done by. And so we'll see. Maybe Ohio State will, again, we'll see if it's going to be clearly a bloodbath between the 4, or whether Ohio State will again kind of reclaim its spot as the clear number 1, and they'll be good games, but they'll just show that they're just better than the other 3.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting, Mark. I mean, though I've watched Ohio State a decent amount this year, and I think they've improved a lot on the defensive side of the ball since where they were early on in the season, and they never really struggled a ton offensively. I know that in the Oregon game they had tons of yards, but they just weren't able to put touchdowns together. So that was probably the biggest game that they struggled. But Stroud looks like a Heisman contender right now, and so they're rolling on the offensive side of the ball right now. So now that the defense is kind of caught up, I think they're clearly the best team in the conference. And to your point, we'll see. We'll see what some of these other teams are able to do when the competition gets a little bit tougher. I'm probably more of a believer in Michigan than I am Michigan State right now, just based on just some of the competition that they faced already in the year versus Michigan State. So yeah, it's going to be interesting going down the stretch. I mean, who knows? Maybe we talked about. I mean, wouldn't it be so on par for this 2021 season for Nebraska to be a team that can't find a way to beat anyone, but they find a way to beat Ohio State and Lincoln.
That would be 2021.